Whew, okay, hardest part's over. I was really scared about walking down here in my heels, but we made it. Here's hoping for the way out. So I'm here to talk to you guys today about pain. Now, when I say pain, most of your brains probably automatically go to some sort of physical ailment, whether it be a broken arm with a cast or a sprained ankle with one of those walking boots, but something you can see. Pain is so much easier for us to understand when we can see it. But pain's actually so much more than that. Pain, whether it comes from the mental side via anxiety, depression, loss, bullying, or the physical side from an injury or chronic pain, chronic illness, or chronic fatigue, how we arrive with these ailments might be completely different. But the journey that we take through them is actually really similar. My journey with chronic pain began August 9th, 2015, the day of my 25th birthday. I'm a professional horseback rider by trade and have dreamt since 6 years old of going to the Olympics and representing my country. The sport I do is called 3-day eventing. It's comprised of 3 equestrian disciplines over 3 days. The first phase is called dressage. It's like dancing on horses. The second phase is called show jumping. It's going over the big jumps with the rails that fall down like you see on TV. The third phase, however, is called cross country. It's fast, adrenaline pumping, but it's also really dangerous. It's going hell-bent for leather over jumps that if you hit them, you fall down, not the jump. I headed down to a big competition in the United States and was actually leading the highest level of competition at that show with points to spare heading into cross country. Now, getting to go cross country, because it's so fun, on your birthday feels a little bit like a dream come true. But getting to go cross country on your birthday in first place, nothing was going to break my stride. Or so I thought. Our course started out amazing. It flew by in perfect jumps until disaster struck at the last fence. My large horse, Jackson, put a tiny misjudged step into the base of the jump, and we had a rotational fall. We hit the fence and did a somersault together in the air, and my 1,200-pound horse landed on me on the other side, and we skid 10 feet with me underneath him. Doesn't sound like it went well from here, does it? My poor mom's in the back. She, I think, got some gray hairs that day. It's all my fault. I was helicoptered to the hospital in Seattle, where I was diagnosed with 3 fractured vertebrae in my back, my L2, 3, and 4. A few days later, and a lot of pain meds, I was finally sprung from what felt like my own personal jail. I was eager to get home and get back to competing, knowing that Olympic qualifiers were just around the corner. I knew that if I could get back to riding right away, I wouldn't miss a beat. I was told a couple months off, and I would be good as new. When I first got back on, I felt like my spine was collapsing. I was nauseous with pain. So I started to look elsewhere for some healing methods, and that's what landed me in chiropractic. Through chiro and new patient x-rays, I learned that not only is your L2, 3, and 4 in the middle of your back, if you ask me anything about horse anatomy, I can help you, but I know nothing about people anatomy. My pain had always been low down, so that surprised me. We also learned through the x-rays that we'd missed a few things. I was also diagnosed with a fractured pelvis, a crushed SI joint, and a dislocated pelvis. No wonder I was still in so much pain. He sent me with these x-rays to my doctors to get a confirmation, and he confirmed. My healing period got extended, and I was heartbroken. I knew that this length of time would put me out of any shot of making the 2016 Olympics. Taking all this healing time, I figured that I would be progressively getting better. But the opposite seemed to be true. Every day, the pain was a little bit worse. Every week, I seemed to limp a little bit more, and every month, the pain got harder and harder to bear. Finally, when my left foot started to go completely numb and I couldn't feel it, I realized something more was going on. And normal people would have been like, yeah, get in the doctors right away. But I put it off because I felt like if I was in my doctors anymore, I was going to need like frequent flyer miles or like my own personal room dedicated to me there. But when my foot started to go blue and I actually lost the ability to flex my toes or weight bear on it, I realized I couldn't put it off anymore. So I limped my way into my doctor, and he was completely panicked. He thought that the wings that had also broken off my vertebrae, called the transverse processes, were now interfering with my spinal cord, and I was actually risking paralysis. He wrote me a requisition and sent me to the Spinal Specialty Hospital in Vancouver. I drove down there terrified. I figured with this kind of looming diagnosis, at least I would get amazing care. But the opposite seemed to be true. I sat for 4 hours waiting, 4 hours nervous that every shift in my chair, every time I sneezed or had to get up to go to the bathroom, that I could paralyze myself. So when they finally called my name, I so eagerly limped my way into the exam room and handed the doctor my requisition form. But he put it down. He didn't read it, That doctor didn't examine me or ask me a single question about my body or my pain. He didn't send me for a single test. He looked at me and he said, "What drugs do you want?" Now, I'm not a big believer in taking prescription medicine for pain, especially chronic pain, unless you absolutely have to, because it's a really slippery slope. We always need the pain, but then what happens is our brain starts to manifest pain to feed the drug dependency. And then how do you tell where the pain starts and stops and the need to fill the drugs actually begins? Well, I never wanted to find that out. So that's why I was more than a little surprised that that's all he was offering. I said, no, I need help, not drugs. And that doctor looked at me. That doctor I'd waited 4 hours to see looked at me and said, "Well, I'm busy, so you can take the drugs or you can leave." So I left. That's a day I will never forget. That's the day for me that hope died. So many doctors before had told me my injuries were permanent and that my suffering would last the rest of my life, but I'd refused to believe it until that moment. That doctor, with his lack of care, ripped all the last hope I had. Things got really dark. I started to miss work. I started to withdraw from my friends and family. Even getting out of bed each morning became harder. It had always hurt to get out of bed before, but I had something to get out of bed for, but not anymore. My rock bottom came on a Wednesday morning. I'd had a fight with somebody, and I was out of spoons. And now, if you've never heard of the spoon theory, it's by a woman named Christine Miserandino, and she describes living in chronic pain as waking up every day with a certain number of spoons, and you give 1 spoon per activity. So for example, if you wake up with 10 spoons, 10 activities, that's pretty good. Except what people who don't suffer in pain don't realize is it actually takes a spoon for the smallest activities. Getting up and getting dressed, that's a spoon. Feeding yourself breakfast, that's a spoon. Feeding your pets or your kids, that's another spoon. God forbid you have to take a shower, that's for sure a spoon. And now you're halfway through your spoons for the day and you haven't even left. Well, that day I was out of spoons when someone unloaded their day on me. And when you're in chronic pain, your threshold to take any exterior things are so low that it hit me like a ton of bricks. I sat on my bathroom floor where I had fallen because my pelvis dislocated yet again, as it was doing so often. I sat there on the floor for hours, crying, holding a bottle of painkillers, and deciding it was time to end my life. I knew that it was too hard to bear, and I couldn't keep going on like this. Because when you're 25 and living at a 10 out of 10 in pain every single day, and your injuries are permanent, and you have more days ahead of you than behind you, that's a pretty sad existence. How do you justify going on like that? Oh, I couldn't anymore. I sat on that floor for hours, thinking about all the things that I was going to miss, all the people I would never see again, and what I'd be leaving behind for them in pain. I was just about to take that first step into ending my life when I got hit with a wave of all the skills that I learned from horseback riding. And now I don't mean the physical skills of riding, but I mean the strong, fight-back attitude that it takes to be a professional athlete. They hit me, and I got up. I physically pulled myself to a stand. Tony Robbins describes changing your mood in 2 ways, by changing your focus and changing your physiology. And that's just what I did that day. I did it before there were even tools I knew I had. I changed my focus by getting up, crawling up the counter, and I looked myself in the mirror and I yelled, "Enough!" And I literally yelled. And it was a battle cry that I needed for myself to change from the victim who was losing her battle to chronic pain to the fighter who was going to get up every time and fight for her life. You know that song, "I get knocked down, but I get up again"? Well, that's just what I was going to do every time. I was raised to be a strong, independent person who was not going to let anybody tell her what her life was going to look like, not let anybody tell her what her healing was going to look like. Nobody could decide that I wasn't going to get better except for me. And that was enough. I'd had enough of the pity party. I changed my physiology by moving. I decided in that moment I was going to commit to 5 minutes a day of walking. 5 minutes every day. And those 5 minutes felt like agony. That 5 minutes felt at the time like the equivalency of running a marathon. And then the strangest thing happened. Every day, that 5 minutes started to get a little bit longer and then a little bit faster. And then that thing that was torturing me every day became the thing that I was living for every day. And that's when I realized, if all you have in your day is pain, that's a pretty sad existence. as soon as I brought even the smallest amount of things into my day that brought me joy, life began worth living again. Now, all of this physical healing did so much towards my progress, but there's still a huge part left to go, and that was the emotional side of healing. I needed to accept that I'd put 20 years into a goal that I just was never going to have, and that was okay. I needed to forgive my body for not being able to come back from this. I needed to realize that just because I spent those 20 years chasing something I couldn't have, didn't mean that those years were a waste. Those years made me a passionate person. They made me goal-driven and the type of person who's going to chase down what she wants for her life. Soon as I started to accept these and understand that this was a part of my healing and I had to let that go, my healing took off. Now, that's not to say that I'm not in pain. Standing here right now, especially in these heels, I'm at a 7 out of 10 in pain. I'm at pain every day, at least a 6 out of 10. But that same pain that used to hold me back from my dreams now inspired me. It inspired me to start a blog. Because in those moments, I felt like the only person in the world suffering. I felt so alone, but that just wasn't true. I was never alone. I made myself feel alone. When I put my first blog post out, I had 500 responses within 48 hours. Half were people who had no idea that I had suffered, and I really never felt like I suffered silently. The other half, which was even more amazing, were people who shared their pain stories with me, and people who I had no idea were suffering. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. I isolated myself. And I think so many of us do that in chronic pain because we're ashamed that maybe we're not as strong physically or mentally as we thought we are. But to be honest, I think that's garbage. I think if you get up every day in pain, whether it's physical or mental, and you go to work and you play with your kids and you see your friends and you chase down your goals, all while in pain, that makes you even stronger. But just because we can fight through it alone doesn't mean that we should. Do you remember that hashtag #MeToo movement where all those brave people came forward and shared their horrible experiences? But it gave permission to people who are suffering silently to do the same. Well, that's what I want for chronic pain. I want #PainToo, a community of people suffering together. Because a million days in pain together is easier than one day apart. Thank you so much.